Hey everybody, Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence here at Trend Micro, and welcome to another episode, actually episode 8 of our Trend Talks BizSec. With me today again is Ed Cabrera. Ed, how you doing today?
Fantastic. Looking for another great episode.
Yeah, and actually today we're going to talk about the Trend Micro 2022 Midyear Report. We just published that this week, and it's got some really good information. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different aspects of it, just to give you some information and maybe a little different perspective of that. But you can certainly go to the Trend Micro website and go to the research section and download that report, and it'll give you a lot of details about what happened in the first half. One thing I'd like to chat about, Ed, right up front is a lot of people may not realize how we gather this information, where we gather the information to be able to analyze and build out these kind of, this kind of a report. So, thoughts around that?
No, I think that's the one sort of secret that a lot of people don't know about is the vast amount of researchers that we have, but the amount of global sensors that collects copious amounts of data on a daily basis. And it's really at the heart of everything that we do, from a threat intelligence, vulnerability intelligence, to improve all of our products.
Yeah, and if you look at through the report, you'll notice that we cover a lot of areas, unlike some of our peers in the industry that tend to focus on just certain areas. But when you look at Trend Micro, we have product basically that covers endpoints, and that could be PCs to servers to virtual servers to IoT devices. We do smart home network devices. Then you move into the network layer, you move into the email layer, the web layer, you've got cloud infrastructure that we're looking at. All of these different areas, we are actually pulling a lot of threat intelligence, threat data from across the globe. We've got 400,000 or 500,000 commercial customers alone. Talk about tens of millions of consumer customers, and we're pulling all of that data. It's pretty incredible, Ed. You think about, and I think that gives, obviously our customers have an extreme benefit because of that, but in order for us to provide this kind of information out there to the world about what's going on, it's pretty impressive, right?
No, I mean, it's extremely impressive. I mean, when you look at, because basically everything that we do begins and ends with data, right? I mean, when you look at what you need to really analyze the threats today across multiple platforms, for commercial to consumer, like you mentioned, data is king. And so, I mean, it is pretty awesome when you look at the amount of data that we get at the process and correlate and be able to do the analysis that we do. Yeah, it's definitely impressive.
Yeah, and we obviously have to use automation. When we have 2.5 trillion events every single day that we have to deal with, obviously there's a ton of automation in the back end. But we also, obviously, as you said, we've got 450 plus human intelligence researchers that do their thing as well. So let's get into the report a little bit. We break it up into a number of areas, and I wanted to hit on a few of these areas. The first area, Ed, is around APT Groups, which are Advanced Persistent Threat Groups. These are the groups that are out there that are targeting customers and targeting the world, essentially. And we talk about a number of those, whether it's Earth Berberoka, Earth Luska, but what I want to talk a little bit about, Ed, is kind of the tactics that we see today from them and that we saw in the first half. Any thoughts around that?
No, I think, we'll cover these tactics here in a second, but I think ultimately, when you look at APT groups, or traditionally been categorized APT groups, I think what's happened over the years is this sort of blending and blurring of lines, right? Where from the cyber criminal groups and the APT actors, but around the tactics and techniques that they utilize. And what we see is also on a macro level is that these APT groups, are sophisticated when they need to be, right? I mean, this whole notion that every APT attack requires a group of 0 days to accomplish is not the case, right? And also APT groups, are not all created equal. And obviously the countries that are behind these APT groups are not, created equal either, from a level of expertise, funding, and tools that they utilize and develop, So, no, let's get into the report.
Yeah, and so on the APT side, really, it was interesting. We actually highlighted a couple of different groups. What was interesting to me, Ed, is when you looked at their attack life cycles, they all kind of look pretty similar. And that's one of the things you just mentioned, is that they obviously they're all different, but they all sort of do use similar tactics across the board, because they work, right?
Exactly. So when you look at from a tactic, going after high value targets, individuals, is not going to go away. Why? Because like you said, it works.
Yeah, and so we'll continue to monitor these actor groups, and we'll be publishing regularly a bunch of research reports and articles about these groups. But the second area, Ed, obviously is in ransomware. We can't disregard ransomware. It's still one of the biggest threats out there. Obviously, it's the biggest one in the news. And the thing that's interesting is we really highlighted that ransomware attacks actually seem to diminish a bit over in the first half compared to year on year, but the tactics, again, the ransomware-as-a-service groups actually seem to grow a bit more. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising, right? We know this whole business model, which is ransomware as a service, has just been evolving, and where it was centralized at one point, where it was a one-stop shop. It was the ransomware as a service providers provided everything, and now it is really grown into this affiliate model, which is really the more concerning, but it's the way they're able to scale and have much more impact, right? They're able to utilize and partner with these affiliate groups. They themselves do not have to provide the services directly, right? So it's an evolving type of business model, a criminal enterprise, but it's pretty amazing how effective they are.
Yeah, and there's two things that I want to highlight that I thought were interesting with this ransomware as a service model. One is we seem to be seeing a lot more expertise happening in the underground. So you have ransomware as a service groups, you have access as a service groups, and they're starting to work together, which is obviously concerning. But the other piece, and you mentioned, is the affiliates are buying into these ransomware as a service groups because they're providing, whether it's a full service offering or it could be partial service offering. But one of the things we are starting to see is actually competition in that underground to provide better services, because they're actually going after affiliates all the time, and they want to recruit these affiliates, so they have to provide better and better services, better tools, better whatever. And obviously that's going to be concerning to me, because that means they're going to get better and better at what they do.
No, absolutely. So you can imagine these affiliates are these micro groups within these RAS operators that have a higher level of skill set, or the ones that are most successful have a higher level of skill sets. And so you could see the competition around wanting to recruit and actually utilize these affiliates within their RAS offerings, because it creates a value a proposition for those, obviously budding cyber criminals, those that are not, so technical, but the RAS operators basically, are able to then, off the backs of their affiliates, make a mint. And so, so the competition is not surprising that these sort of very capable groups, these affiliates, you have different RAS operators probably competing for these different affiliates.
Yeah, so it looks like we're going to continue to see actually maybe less ransomware attacks, but they're going to be much more focused. They're going to be doing the big game hunting type of tactic, where they're going to identify these organizations that are more likely to pay and get their payments. We also saw, obviously, the multiple extortion happening. Most of these ransomware-as-a-service groups do multiple extortion. Maybe chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, when you look at the multiple extortion model and your double, triple, models, meaning that they're not just going to obviously encrypt your data and then extort you to decrypt your own data. Now they're obviously not only finding and going deeper within a post-breach model, going in, finding the crown jewels, stealing those crown jewels, then encrypting copies and their originals on still within the victim's system and infrastructure, but then now they have a copy, and so that double extortion piece is now they threaten to dox those victims, that if they don't pay, that, hey, not only you're not going to get the keys, but we're actually going to release your sensitive information. And then you just go deeper and deeper with these types of models. You're only limited by your imagination, where how else can you provide additional, could it be DDoS, could be anything else, additional pressures for the organizations to pay.
Yeah, and so ransomware is certainly here to stay. In fact, one of the groups that we highlighted, Black Boston, we actually published a Ransomware Spotlight article today with some information. We've been doing these Ransomware Spotlight articles quite often. We're going to continue to do those. So again, go to our website. You'll be able to find that. We're also going to be releasing the second quarter ransomware update as part of what we do on a regular basis. So, earlier, Ed, you mentioned 0 days, and I want to bring up, we have a whole section from our 0 Day Initiative, which is our bug bounty program that pays these researchers money for bugs to submit to us. We take those bugs, we work with the vendor affected and to make sure that they responsibly disclose a patch and the information about the bug responsibly out there. And, we saw a pretty good increase from last year, first half of last year to this year, where I think they had 940 to 950 vulnerabilities that they disclosed in the first half of this year. And obviously the good news here is actually we saw an increase in both critical and high vulnerabilities, severity vulnerabilities submitted to us. Let's talk a little bit about the vulnerability market and what we're seeing today.
Yeah, I think this. Well, let's talk about the 0 Day Initiative. I mean, we're able to extend our 450 threat and vulnerability researchers that we have internally by a factor of 3,000, right? So to leverage these 3,000 independent researchers to be able to find bugs not only that are affecting enterprise, but we see an active work that we're doing, but also of interest when it comes to critical infrastructure and threat actors looking to exploit and attack critical infrastructure. I think we just saw today some news about water treatment facilities being attacked and targeted.
A ransomware gang got access, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only are the cyber criminals, but APT Groups very interested in critical infrastructure. And so even the bug bounty programs, us focusing on ICS systems, PLCs, and so forth, and being able to identify, OS and application, vulnerabilities associated for enterprise, but ICS is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we actually blocked, I think, over 60 billion threats that were targeting our customers. But when I looked at that, broke it out by the IPS products that we have that actually have virtual patches, and we're talking billions of hits on those where they're trying to be exploited by these actors out there, and we're blocking those through our virtual patching process. When our 0 Day Initiative works with those teams to make sure we have protection for our customers through those virtual patches. So, but when you look at kind of looking at the vulnerability market, you mentioned 0 days, and certainly we do see 0 days out there. But the end day, which is the known vulnerabilities that have patches, those are still predominantly what is being used to exploit by the criminals out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's on average, some of these vulnerabilities are 2+ years old that haven't been patched. And so, yes, the onus is on us as a collective defenders to be able to have very good patch management processes, and that we're implementing them in the most efficient manner. And obviously, utilizing and leveraging, virtual patching, techniques as well to do that. So yeah, I mean, it's not surprising to see, and just like threat actors going after, individuals and users behind the keyboard, through email and through phishing and targeted, phishing. It's why? Because it works, right? And so, these vulnerabilities are out there. They're still not being patched. And so why, focus on some new or 0 day when an end day, vulnerability works just as well.
Yeah. So those are certainly going to continue. The last area I wanted to highlight, Ed, is we actually had a whole thing on Emote Tech. Emote Tech, started as a banking Trojan many, many years ago, but that group who use it and sell it it's a malware-as-a-service offering in the underground. Have obviously they've done their due diligence to improve that. Where today it's actually not even really a banking Trojan anymore. It's almost like a tool that can be used by any of these criminals. And we even saw Conti and Ryuk ransomware groups using it. But we saw a big increase in the detections of Emote Tech in the first half of this year. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, even before you have the Emote Tech discussion, when you talk about, we're also seeing, we saw a 75% increase in these ransomware attacks on Linux systems, right? And so obviously there is this, obviously the connection with the cloud is very obvious. I mean, by some reporting or estimates, you have over 90% of server operating systems is Linux, in the cloud, public cloud. So you see this as a problem across the board, but Emote Tech specifically is a very interesting story because we thought it was down and out, right? We thought that they were shut down, they weren't going to come back. And obviously, as we know, anything from a cyber criminal on the ground, aspect, whether it be arrest of the individuals and or taking down infrastructure, they do not end or die quickly unless they choose to do so, so to speak. And so the Emote Tech story is really interesting, that we thought it was down and out, and now has a huge resurgence here in the first half of 2022.
Yeah, and that's certainly concerning us. Going back to that Linux thing, we talked earlier about the breadth of our capabilities, and obviously we have a lot of sensors in Linux. We do a ton of cloud work, so we've got the sensors running on these Linux operating systems. So we're seeing tons and tons of attacks targeting Linux, and I think that's a trend we're going to continue to see. Obviously, the cloud is a prime target for actor groups and individuals out there, bad individuals, and that runs predominantly Linux. So I think this is something we're going to continue to see grow over time. So anybody who's using Linux internally better start paying attention to attacks and protections for your Linux environment, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at, when you look at from just an adversary and or attacker mindset, they're going to always go wherever we are at, right? And so if predominantly we have a huge transition, at the enterprise level on cloud adoption, and cloud adoption usually means, as what we've seen, is that a lot of the server infrastructures run on Linux. So you can, it doesn't take to be a rocket science and make the connection that we're going to see a huge amount of activity going forward. Cloud is, right now the discussion about the major threat to cloud is still misconfigurations, right? And it's still, when we talk about from a malware perspective, is crypto mining. So the idea that ransomware could be there, a growth area for those RAS to attack cloud is interesting.
Yeah, and that whole section on misconfigurations is pretty worrying because, we have a couple of charts from our cloud conformity team that's showing the misconfiguration rate on AWS services, Azure services, Google Cloud services. I mean, we're seeing upwards, even 100% misconfiguration rates, mostly in the 90+%. So obviously, companies have a long way to go to learn those technologies and how to configure them properly.
Yeah. I mean, what I like about the report is we actually break it down also by service, right? So obviously, regardless of the cloud provider or the multiple services that they provide and the services that are out there, we actually break it down to the services with the most misconfiguration rates.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably all we have time for, Ed. Again, great discussion today. Any final comments you want to make?
No, I think this definitely encourage everybody to take a look and read. We're able to cover a lot of material in this report. I think it's 64 pages, I believe. And so when you look at it, it's pretty comprehensive. And like anything else and everything else, reach out to us if you have any questions additionally, and we can get you in contact with our researchers.
Yeah, and so thanks everybody for joining us again in this episode of Trend Talks BizSec. Ed and I will be back in a couple weeks to talk about another topic. So with that, thanks everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.